Albert Breer of the MMQB on the Fan Hotline. Albert, Merry Christmas, and welcome to the show, buddy.
Merry Christmas to you guys and everybody out there.
Well, it's great to talk with you. I guess with 2 weeks to go, the Browns at 3-12. Previously, Jimmy Haslam had said another 3-win season wouldn't cut it. How much do the next 2 weeks matter to the futures of Stefanski and Barry?
It's tough to say. I don't know if a clean sweep is coming. It doesn't sound that way anyway. And, I think at this point, if you're, if you're Jimmy, if you're, that the people who are in Jimmy's ear and talking to him on this stuff, you've already had some of these discussions of what this looks like after the season. And that's, I think a lot of that stuff is gonna incorporate everything that's happened thus far, and I just don't know at the end of a 3-12 season what you're going to show in the last 2 weeks that's going to blow you away. They haven't given up. I mean, they fought and they played the Bills last week. That was, I thought, a lot better effort than they showed the week before in Chicago. So given that, I really thought they rolled over against the Bears. But I still sort of have that feeling that, at the very least, this feels like it's the end of something. And, what level of change that is remains to be seen. Is that Barry stays, Stefanski goes? Is that, Barry is moved into a different sort of role as part of a restructure? I think there are a bunch of different outcomes on the table. And I don't know that Jimmy really knows what he's going to do yet, So, those discussions, I would assume, I don't know, but I would assume those discussions have started to happen already. And, now I think the last 2 games kind of become the backdrop for whatever's next.
I think with Stefanski, I agree 100%. The idea that I don't know that he knows what he's doing yet, and I can't find anyone that reports on this stuff that will concretely say one thing or another. But with Barry, what I do find interesting is whether that is Pelissero and Rap Sheet over the weekend, or whether that is Mary Kay Cabot in the past couple of days, and really now for going on a week, saying that Andrew Barry's 100% safe. That, I think, is interesting, and that feels like that's the concurrent read on that. Do you feel that way as well?
I don't know if it's 100%, because again, I think, the reason I always hesitate with that stuff is because it's what level of coach are you looking for, right? Are you looking for a young guy? Are you looking to hit a home run? Are you looking for Andrew Barry to be intimately involved in the coaching search? Is ownership going to run the coaching search? I think Andrew would have a voice in a coaching search if there is one. I think this thing can take on different forms. And, we've seen before where teams have come out of Black Monday with a general manager intact and a coach gone. And then that changes, right? The best example, I think, is Kansas City in 2013 when, they went forward with Scott Pioli, and then the idea of getting Andy Reid became real. And so then they wound up walking away from Pioli to accommodate, Andy Reid. This past year in Jacksonville, if you guys remember.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, Jacksonville this year, Trent Baalke was the GM, I think, for it was 2 or 3 weeks after the season ended. And then they just ran into too many people that didn't want to work with Baalke. Now, that won't be the case with Andrew Barry. I can promise you that. It won't, because Baalke's name was sort of mud in the view of a lot of coaches. But, it kind of had gotten to the point where a lot of people had said no. And, the one that they wound up wanting, Liam Cohen, showed some willingness to come if there were if there were more total changes, and so, and actually in that case, it's interesting. If you really want to study this stuff, one of the reasons Liam Cohen decided to reverse course and leave Tampa and take the Jacksonville job was because they were going to let him help pick the next GM, which was a rare opportunity. I think the last time that happened with a first-time head coach coming in was with Kyle Shanahan in 2017 in San Francisco. So, it's very, very rare, right? So it's just kind of I would say it does, it can look different. You know what I mean? A couple of weeks into a coaching search than maybe it does right there on Black Monday. So I don't think the plan right now is to walk away from Andrew Barry, but I think, what his role in this is and kind of what the structure of the organization looks like coming out of this, all that is still to be determined.
Albert, we've heard if Kevin Stefanski's fired by the Browns, he's going to be a prime candidate elsewhere. So given the dearth of quality names out there, like meaning there's no Ben Johnson or Mike Vrabel as of right now in the coaching market, would there be a trade market for Kevin Stefanski?
See, that's an interesting question. The problem with that is that if you're holding on to him, can you conduct a coaching search concurrently? You know what I mean? Like, and I think you'd really be threading the needle there, where it's like, if this becomes a competitive market and you don't know who you're hiring, right? Like, let's say you go in and say, we're going to have an open mind. We're going to look at, like, the young defensive guys, like your Jeff Halfleys, your Matt Burks, Anthony Campanelli, Jesse Minter, those guys, Chris Shula. We're going to look at some young offensive guys, maybe a Grant Udinski, who'll be early, but in Jacksonville, Joe Brady in Buffalo. We're going to look at some ex-head coaches like Mike McCarthy and Matt Nagy and Brian Flores, right? Let's say you do that. There are other teams that are going to be going with that same approach, and do you want to be behind those other teams, Because I think it would take some time for Kevin Stefanski to figure out where he wants to go. You'd have to sort of thread the needle there and give him permission to talk, and then you work out compensation. So, are you putting yourself in a competitive market where there's far more demand than there is supply? Are you putting yourself in a position where you're going to be behind some of these other teams and getting to know the candidates out there? It's an interesting question, and I understand what you're saying. But it almost feels to me like this would have to be more like a team being more proactive about it. And as much as I think he'll get another job, I don't know that somebody's going to come in on whatever that Monday is, January 5th, I think, whatever that Monday is just going to come in and say, hey, here's a first-round pick and a fourth-round pick for Kevin Stefanski. I don't see it playing out that way.
On the topic of coaches that could potentially be on the hot seat, with John Harbaugh directly was asked questions yesterday about it, and he addressed it almost in like a if it happens type nature. Are you hearing any whispers? Is there anything behind the scenes about the status within John Harbaugh and what eventually could happen at the end of the season?
So I'd be pretty stunned if he was fired, right? I don't think that's going to happen. Would he walk away? I don't know. I think he loves that organization. He loves that place. There is that question. He's been there 18 years. There's always the question, is it time? I think in these sorts of situations, similar to Tomlin in this way, where does something force the conversation? I think we've talked about that with Tomlin, right? Where the age of the roster and the need to eventually reset the roster is going to eventually force that conversation with Tomlin, right? When T.J. Watt and Cam Hayward and Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Rodgers and all those guys are gone, and you're going through a more thorough reset, that's when you have to sit down and say, okay, Mike, do you want to go through a real rebuild? And then they have to ask, is Mike the right guy to lead us through that rebuild? And then you start to have that discussion. With Harbaugh, I don't know that they're at that point where there's that organic, we have to make a decision on him now. One thing that could push it along is if somebody else comes along with a draft pick and says, we want to get him out of there, and we want to give him something to think about. So I guess it's possible that somebody could think creatively and do that in this cycle, decide they don't like the market, they don't like what's out there on the market, and let's see if we can go pull him out of there. But I don't think he's going to be fired. I don't think he's just going to voluntarily walk away.
Albert, if the Browns do move on from Kevin Stefanski, will the Browns' job be a coveted one?
I mean, there's only 32, right? There's that piece of it. I think that's a little bit of a TBD. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard the same thing I have, right? About Kevin potentially moving into DePodesta's old role. I've asked about that specifically. Are they going to fill that role? And I was told no. The chief strategy officer role. But could Andrew Berry be in a president of football ops role with a general manager underneath him? Could they reimagine the whole thing a little bit? I think that's possible. And if that happens, I think the attractiveness of the job then is about what does the rest of the operation look like? They don't have a long-term answer quarterback right now. So that might put them behind, a team like the Giants, a team like the Titans, depending on what you think of Dart or Ward. But there is young talent on hand now, and you do have 2 first-round picks. So I think there is the opportunity, if you're a young coach, to go in there and sort of create your own thing. You're not inheriting a ton of pieces that you can't do anything with. You've got a couple of older guys in Garrett and Ward, but those guys are guys that any coach would want. You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see, how this one stacks up with the other jobs. I personally look at it for me, if I was a candidate, I would look at it and I'd say a really good class going into its second year, 2 first-round picks, a couple of veteran star players, ownership that's willing to spend and do what it takes to win, despite, things having gone sideways over the course of their ownership. And so from there, it will kind of come down to, am I comfortable with Andrew Berry? And am I comfortable with the structure that they're setting up? Can I bring in somebody on the personnel side that has the same vision as me? I think those would all be questions that you'd be asking if you were a coach looking at that job and you had options maybe other places.
Albert, obviously I can't have you be like, hey, go inside Myles Garrett's brain. So I just want your opinion on this. The idea that we haven't really heard Myles be a distraction or really come up with any sort of complaining like he typically does this time of the year when they're a 3-win season. Do you feel like the going for the sack record has been a good distraction for Myles when it comes to that?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think he also probably has a self-awareness to know, I can't. There's a little bit of a period where I can't complain because I signed up to be back here. I took the money, so I think he understands that piece of it. I'm sure that going for the sack record gives him something that's going to continue to motivate him through the end of the year. And I don't know that Myles is a different dude, but I don't know that I don't know that effort's ever been a problem with him. I wouldn't say so, right, guys?
Right. The effort's always there.
Yeah, the effort's always been there, and he's always had the desire to be a great player. It's always shown up in his play. So yeah, I think probably has more to do with I just signed the contract, and for right now at least I understand it's probably going to come off poorly if I complain about being here. But I mean, who knows? Here's the other thing is if you're and I've talked about the idea of trading Myles, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're a new coach, maybe you come in and say, look, what can we get for him? Let's at least think about this. Let's think this through, it's just an interesting place for Garrett and the team to be in. And I'm sure Garrett wants to chase championships. You know what I mean? He said he did last year. And I don't think the money changes that, with new leadership coming in and with Myles, I think he's 30 next week. Is that right? I think.
Yeah.
I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah.
Right. So he's turning 30. I think all things. I think if I think there's enough that could change within that organization, and we'll see if maybe Kevin's back. But if it's not that, then I think that does open the door for further discussions on what the future is going to look like for everyone involved.
Albert, Ryan Day took back play calling for the majority for the rest of the playoffs here. Do any concern that this is an act of desperation or maybe panic from Coach Day?
No, because I think he was I don't know, guys. I watch pretty closely every week. I think he's pretty involved in play calling, don't you? Mm-hmm. I don't know that he really fully pulled back from that. I think last year when he had a more experienced play caller in Chip, he did. But from what I understand, he was really involved in the play calling in the playoffs. You know what I mean? It sounded to me at least yeah. Not that Chip wasn't involved. Chip was involved, but Ryan was really involved once they put their foot in the gas, and we remember what that looked like in the playoffs. So I'd be curious to what changes things. What happened last year.
I almost did the whole. We almost did the whole interview without asking about Shedeur, but I wasn't going to let that slide. Nick even did an Ohio State thing.
You can't let that slide. You can't let public enemy number one off the line without asking about what's happening with the case, right?
Well, but I'll leave it as open ended as you want. What is your take right now after watching again last week, and then with 2 more games left? Where do you sit with Shedeur?
Yeah, I got to watch a good bit of that game. And I'll be honest, like I can't watch every Browns game all the way through. Like, so generally I see them when they play against the better teams, just because of how I juggle everything on a Sunday. And, you're trying to pay attention to all 32, but you get to the end of the year and it's like there are certain games that you're paying closer attention to than others. I would say, what I see now is a guy who has grown and is a little calmer in the pocket, and a guy who has figured out like how to make some things happen with his legs. You saw him move the chains in some key spots against Buffalo. And I think like the best thing you can say for him is like, it doesn't feel like he's getting over his skis too much. Like it doesn't feel like he's trying to do too much and knows his limitations, which is good. Here's the thing. It's like, I do not think like you can go into 2026, regardless of who's coaching. Like, I don't think you can go into 2026 with Shedeur Sanders as your quarterback. Like, yes, lock, stock, and barrel. He's our guy. Let's go. But what I do think you could do is you could bring in a veteran. If you don't like the quarterback class, like let's say you're not in position to draft the one you like, or you just don't like the class in general, whether it's Dante Moore, Fernando Mendoza, Ty Simpson, whoever else is available, because I don't think it's a great class. I think like Shedeur gives you a piece that like, you could throw into a competition with a veteran in 2026 and see what comes out of it. Like he's done enough, like at least for me, to say, okay, like I'm not going to stake my entire season in 26 on him. But depending on the circumstances, he's valuable in that he gives us a little bit of flexibility in what sort of quarterback we're looking for when we go out on the veteran market and we go out and try to find one in the draft.
Albert, great stuff, buddy. Hopefully we get. Hopefully your Christmas
Was
this
that
year.
fair, by the way? I don't know. Like,
very fair.
Yeah, I actually think the gap between where you are and where we are is pretty nil right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't like. I don't know. I always, I think you guys deal with the same audience that I do on that, and they're an interesting group for sure.
I think on both ends, very interesting group there. Both sides of the extreme there. Hopefully get another Ohio State national championship under your Christmas tree this year, buddy. Merry Christmas to you and the Breer family. We appreciate you all year long, buddy.
Thank you, Albert.
Yeah. Merry Christmas to both of you guys and Keith and everybody else behind the scenes, and then everybody out there in Northeast Ohio.
Good man, Albert Breer there, MMQB.